I wasn't planning to share something, but inspired by what Benjamin Scheuer just took us through, I want to take a moment, if you'll allow me, unplanned. Benjamin helped me, and still does, not only find my voice, but find strength when I need to continue digging into new areas. And anytime I've had the honor over the last several years to talk to people or to give a talk or to be a part of something, I've seen that as an opportunity to dig deeper into new areas that I didn't know I could or didn't know previously that I was able to. And I've spent now, 8 years doing that. And just looking back on, the things that I went through, both as a 2-time cancer survivor, and then through something else that I just want to share in a minute, it's amazing to me how many things were really locked inside that I didn't know I would be able to find a voice to share. And so listening to Benjamin and how incredibly inspiring he is, and just playing, I'm sitting in my parents' home where I grew up now, my mom's house now. And while Benjamin was playing, I went upstairs and I grabbed my dad's guitar, just the same way that Benjamin shared music with his dad. I went up and grabbed the guitar that has always sat in my dad's closet. My dad, I believe, got it when he went into the service. And I think he told my mom that he was looking for things to do. But I think really he was probably trying to find ways to deal with what he was going through. And so I think that, my dad didn't continue playing after service, and it sat in the closet ever since then. But hearing how Ben was able to use music to find his voice, I understand that deeply. And my voice has come from other areas now as I've grown up. And so getting to give talks and understand what I've been through has helped me find my voice. And then getting to a place now where I get to be around people that are finding their voice and helping others do the same thing is purpose I never knew that I would find in my life. And so the individuals that you're going to meet in just a second are panelists in this conversation. The importance of your voice are individuals who are at various points in their own journey or their own work. And I asked at the beginning of today, how do we want to be different? And for me, as we go through this conversation, the individuals you meet will be at various points, either in their own personal journey or the work that they do. But I hope that our audience, that you, sees that wherever you are, wherever your experience is at the moment, another step forward or another step to finding your voice is possible. And I am really honored to be able to introduce these individuals and the work that they're doing now. And so, KT, I believe you share a diagnosis with Benjamin. So could we have you introduce yourself first? Would that be okay?
Sure, not a problem. My name is KT Jones. I am a terminal cancer survivor of lymphoma. I was originally diagnosed in 2002. My terminal diagnosis was supposed to have been, from what the doctor told me, I would not make it to see the end of the summer of 2011.
And what was it like for you, KT, in that time, trying to contemplate what that meant?
It was really difficult. I had just lost my mother to colon cancer less than a year prior. I had also lost my grandmother to congestive heart failure, and my best friend had a hole in his intestine. So I had a whole lot on my plate and didn't have the time to even grieve their deaths before finding out that I was in the battle of my life. But my mother raised a very stubborn child, so I wasn't going to take that diagnosis and sit on it.
I love moms for that reason, KT, and I'm excited for you to get to share more of what you've done finding your voice in just a second. If we could, Liz, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everyone from Cincinnati. I am Liz Hiles, and I am a bladder cancer survivor. And I grew up doing advocacy work and doing all sorts of things. So it was a natural fit for me to slide into bladder cancer and ostomy advocacy and education when I was diagnosed.
And Liz, what's it like now from where you started to your voice I respect so much? What does it feel like getting to share your voice now?
I really enjoy doing advocacy work. I always have since I was very young. Um, and as a young bladder cancer patient, I fought for 2 years just to get my diagnosis. The doctors, I was going to the emergency room, they weren't believing that anything was wrong with me. They're like, oh, you just have a UTI or a bladder infection. Here's some medication, go away, no referral to urology or anything. So it was a struggle just to get diagnosed because I didn't fit that bladder cancer mold of old Caucasian chain smoking male. And the face of bladder cancer is not necessarily that anymore, but the medical profession has not caught up with it. So I felt from the very beginning that it was a matter of urgency and it was a necessity for me to share my story.
And what's so empowering to me is how you're a part of that change. You're using your voice to make the system better. And so just honored for you to be able to share more about that in just a few minutes. Thank you for being with us. If we could next have Jacqueline introduce yourself. And Jacqueline, you wear many hats. Can you speak to all the different hats you wear?
Well, good evening from Ireland. Um, my name is Jacqueline, and I'm the Director of Services for East Galway and Midlands Cancer Support Centre. I have had a diagnosis of malignant melanoma, and I'm here to tell the tale. I also sit on the board of ECPC, the European Cancer Patient Coalition in Brussels. So our aim in Brussels is to make everybody in Europe even across the board. So good health should be everybody's right. So we advocate for equal health for everybody. So our motto at ECPC is nothing about us without us.
And that's so powerful, right? I feel like the movement that we're all a part of is really respecting the individual voice and that being a part of improving outcomes and quality of life. And just knowing the work that you do and advancing the patient voice in how we improve things is really humbling. So honored to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. May we have Abby introduce yourself next. And Abby, I'm just in awe of how you started down one path in life and then knew your purpose was in a different direction. Can you share some of that with our attendees?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dave, for the introduction. And I just wanted to sort of introduce myself that I'm very humbled to be a part of this panel today. And my name is Abby Adon, and I worked in the field of clinical trial research and compliance for about 5 years when I was still living in the state of Georgia. And I had a chance to have two different roles. The first was being the clinical trial coordinator as part of the Grady Hospital clinical research team. And then I also transitioned to being a research regulatory compliance specialist at the Winship Cancer Institute to support the various investigators within the lymphoma and also the leukemia teams, in addition to the myeloma team. So it was really very interesting to go from being in the research lens in Georgia to now being in upstate New York, being someone who works in population health research to learn more about pharmacovigilance. So I went from one end of being the person who was responsible for making sure that our clinical trials were done in a clinically operable and ethical manner to now being the person to actually look at research statistics and learn more about unsafe side effects that may have a role on the outcomes of various types of chronic disease patients. And so I definitely wanted to talk to you guys today a little bit more about having that patient voice when you're in a clinical trial context, but also in general as a patient, so that you and also your loved ones have a better idea of ways that you can empower yourselves when you're in the room with doctors and nurses who may not necessarily have the best time constraints, but who still deserve to know your specific story and your specific needs. So I'm definitely looking forward to sharing those insights today.
Abby, what is it like for you, in those moments when we leave the path that we're on to create a new path? It's exciting and also terrifying. And you've made that step to create meaning in your life. What is that like for you?
It really has been a sort of powerful journey in thinking a little bit more about what really sort of stirs my soul. On the one end, I had to think about, well, I'm designing informed consent forms. I'm in control of delegation and training logs for different staff members at my clinical sites. But then I had to think about it, well, is paperwork just going to be, my role in terms of actually empowering or changing things? And so by changing into this new role in terms of thinking about research that actually thinks about what the patient voice is, it actually is something that's a lot more meaningful to me beyond just being the administrative paper pusher. I'm actually in a position now to look more at the insights that patients have about their own treatment course and ways that we can communicate those findings with different clinical professionals to help improve their breadth of work with their patients. So it definitely has been, good to think about how you can go beyond just being sort of the person who's doing a very menial paperwork component to actually being the person to actually look at those different voices and see what people's needs really are.
I love it. I love that you're an example. You're the embodiment of making purposeful change. I hope for everyone that's with us, you can feel all the different stages. So KT and Liz, you had to really advocate for yourselves and your treatment and your care. And now we're starting to advocate, to improve healthcare. And Jacqueline, not only have you gone through your own experience, but you represent a global organization that advocates for nothing with us, without us. And our final panelist that I'm so honored to introduce, Melissa, can you please say hi and introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, hi everybody. My name is Melissa Harris. I'm based out of the UK. So I don't hold a diagnosis, but I hold the absolute honour of being the Patient Insights Director at a clinical research organisation called Covance. And my job is to speak to patients. We call it Voice of Patient. Speak to caregivers, speak to patient advocacy groups, clinicians, anybody really, to make sure that the protocols are designed for patients by patients. So it's my job to listen, and listen again. And then it doesn't matter whether it's something the pharmaceutical companies do want to hear or don't want to hear, it's my job to take action on that. And interestingly, Jacqueline, I said that at a conference just last year, that, on behalf of the patients, you're nothing about us without us. And this is why we should be listening. And we have a saying, my company as well, and that's patients can't wait and neither can we. So this is what drives us, protocols led by patients, written by patients. And I find it incredible. I'm so happy to be here today.
We're honored to have you with us, Melissa. And this panel is very much from different perspectives. And then after this, we're going to go into a couple other sessions where a pharma company is actually using the patient voice to improve protocol design and other things. So I hope we can all feel how much this is all the way from the individual level to changing things really on a global level. Something that really, really struck me in our prep conversation, and you'll have to forgive me, I forget who said it, but one of you said, we don't know there are problems until we speak up and use our voice. Who said that, or did a couple of people in our prep conversation? I wanted to start there if anybody wants to jump on that first. KT, how about if I call on you first? And you're on mute. Please grab the there. Perfect. Yeah, KT, I know. Can we go back to what you shared about how hard you had to fight and how many challenges you had to overcome first in your diagnosis, but then just in trying to learn about clinical trials?
Well, honestly, I had a doctor who did my allo transplant. He and I worked hand in hand through that transplant, and he knew the doctor that I had before, the oncologist who ended up retiring. he knew that I was a fighter and wasn't going to give up. So when he didn't have any other options for me, he gave me the website of clinicaltrials.gov. And he knew that I wasn't going to give up. He told me to write a letter to anyone that was doing any sort of trials with my diagnosis and see where it would go. So I came up with a canned letter and I sent it out to probably a couple hundred people, and I heard absolutely nothing back. So it was very disheartening. It was not an easy site to use. It was not user friendly. And I'm thinking, I before becoming, before dealing with research and development like I am in right now, I used to do claims for an insurance company. So I kind of had a little bit of information that I could use as far as looking up codes and things like that. And I knew how to look up my code, and I put my diagnosis in there. And again, I got no reply back from any of them. It wasn't until I did something crazy where I took that same diagnosis code, put it into YouTube, and I found a doctor who was looking for people who had multiple recurrences of lymphoma, and he wanted to try a test trial on them. He ended up being in Houston, Texas.
What was the story, KT? How did you find him again? Can you share a little more about that?
It's real crazy. Like I said, I had given everyone a chance on the clinicaltrials.gov and I heard nothing back. I just decided to think outside of the box, and I went to YouTube. I put my same diagnosis code in there, and there was a doctor who came up and he gave this lengthy explanation of a trial. He called it, I think it was SGN 35, and he said it showed great response for people like me who have had multiple recurrences of lymphoma, and he was looking for test patients. So I lived in Delaware, and I still live in Delaware, and I saw there was a thing that said MD Anderson Cancer Center with it. So I'm thinking MD was in Maryland. So he had said to me, or said in the video, how long did I believe, I'm sorry, when I had a conversation with him, he asked me how long did I think it would take for me to get to the hospital? And I'm like, well, the furthest part of Maryland's about 2 hours away. I said, worst case scenario, 2 hours. And he's like, where are you coming from? I said, well, I'm coming from Delaware. And he's like, oh, hell, what do you have, a heliport in your backyard? I'm in Houston, Texas. And I was like, wow, okay, I guess it's going to take a little bit longer for me to get there than I had imagined. But I spoke to my wife about it and told her that I do have an avenue now where I have someone that's given me some sort of inkling of hope. I just had to find a way to get to Houston, Texas. And she said, well, if we have to stop paying our mortgage and everything else for you to get that plane ticket, we'll do that.
Wow, so moving, KT. I've said it before, and you are a miracle. Your relentlessness is amazing. Melissa, can I jump right to you? And you spend your days listening to these stories and trying to find ways to make improvements for patients and caregivers. What's it like to be in that role?
It's wonderful, but I think I get to play the battle role. I get to listen to the patients and go to the pharmaceutical companies and the regulatory and say no. So just recently, we were working in a very early oncology study, and the pharmaceutical company had put 12 visits in the first 14 days. And I said, no way, it's too much. You know, the sites were saying it's too much. Everyone was saying it was too much. And the pharmaceutical company stood firm. And I said, I tell you what, I'm going to go and talk to some patients and I'm coming back to you. So off I went, and I had my interviews and had my conversations. And I came back and I said, no way, six visits in 14 days. And he said, no one's ever challenged me before. I said, well, I'm challenging you now. And I said, you could send a mobile nurse. You could have the patients go to Walgreens to have blood draws. You could cancel the visits, and sort out your schedule of assessments. And you know what? That's exactly what they did. They cancelled those visits. We had a win for the patient. We changed the protocol design, And I can tell you now that study is currently ongoing. So every single time I see a protocol, maybe it might be reporting, it's too much, I get to go and say, nope, I'm sorry, this isn't going to happen. This is what the patients say. This is what they would like to suggest. And often the patients have a much, much better way of doing it because it's their lives. So I'm able to say, I'm not going to be belligerent and just say, no, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. I'm going to go with a suggestion. And I take everything the patients tell me and I say, look, why don't we do it like this? Or why don't we do it like that? And I can 9 times out of 10, we get good success. Unless there's a reason for it, then yeah, we get great success. So I think it's a real honor. And I encourage every single patient, especially on this group and other groups, please come and talk to us. We've got a platform, you can speak to us. We want to make these things better. And I think we do, one study at a time.
Very much. In Benjamin's performance that we all just came in from, he talked about how when he was going through cancer, it took control of his life and he felt powerless. And that's how I felt. And I'm sure many, if not all of us, feel that way at certain times. And I so admire Janet Woodcock at the FDA acknowledging that patients are the real experts in our experience. And I love how you're advocating to make sure that it's heard and valued the way that it is.
Yeah, I always say, look at it, you have to look through the eyes of the person who's going through it. You have to look through it through the eyes, as Katie just said, having to stop paying a mortgage to get that plane ticket is not how it should be. We should be finding ways to bring the study to the patient, whether that be a sub-site or something that we can do. We need to literally look at every single protocol through the eyes of the person you're asking to take that, that leap of faith. And only then you can make sure you get it right.
Beautiful. Can we, Jacqueline, go right to you because I feel a special kinship because you and I are both survivors and caregivers, and we work in this space. How do you balance all those hats? And, Melissa just talked about looking through others' eyes. Does that help you be more empathetic? And how do you balance all that?
Yeah, and you have to have balance. One thing I try not to do is bring other people's problems home with me. Not always easy, but if you are empathetic and you have been there, and as you've said, I have been the carer for my husband and I've had the diagnosis myself. And I think the best thing you can do for anybody is give them your time. And the most important thing you can do is actually hear what they're saying. Anybody can listen, but you actually need to hear what they're saying and act on that. It's not your journey, it's not your choice. So we'll say here at the support centre, for all the volunteers and therapists that are here, we're here to support in a way that suits the patient. When somebody walks through the door here, it's not how I think things should happen for them. It's what they want, what they need. And that we can never, ever lose sight of that. That's paramount.
So powerfully said. I was an insights manager, Melissa, in my career before becoming an advocate. So I did that for 10 years, and then I've been a cancer advocate and now doing grit for more than 8 years. And the one thing I've learned is that if I go in thinking I know what someone really wants or looks for, I'm wrong.
It's a disaster. Yeah, because we've never walked a mile in each other's shoes. And it doesn't matter that there's 1,000 patients on a study or 100 patients on a study, they've all got a different need and a different want. And Jacqueline's point, you have to treat everyone on an individual basis, because what you have to listen, I always say you have to listen to the little things because one day there'll be the big things. And that's what I hope we bring to our protocol designs.
I love that. Liz, that feels like a perfect transition. So we met you because you shared your voice in an experience project that we were working on. What is it like to be a part of using your voice in the way that you are now?
For me, it's really rewarding because I had such a horrible experience prior to getting the care team that I have now. So being able to share things that need improved in the system, it was really important for me because I wanted people to be heard. I mean, all the times that they were telling me that I just had an infection, but there was no infection in any of my lab work. And I questioned that, and they still brushed me off, even though I kept repeating that there was something wrong with me and somebody needed to figure it out. Um, it is great that Grit gives the patients a platform, um, because even when I didn't feel like people were listening to me, I still had places that I could go and people I could vent to. And until recently, I actually worked in a medical office as an administrative assistant. So it wasn't like I was an uneducated, unaware person just trying to work my way through the system. Like, I had knowledge of the system, I had knowledge of insurance and how that worked, and I knew the correct language to use, and I was still treated like I was a lot younger than I was at the time. And I was still treated like I was some sort of suburban housewife junkie seeking drugs instead of someone with a legitimate problem.
When I hear that, I think about how much that eats away at our humanity, not being believed or not feeling heard. Um,
It's really discouraging. I mean, at several points, I felt like I was losing my mind, but I was also losing my sleep. So who knows?
yeah, you're all in the few times that we've interacted, you're always so positive. For someone who might be in that place that many of us have been in, that really hard place, what would you share with them? Or, if they're listening now, what advice would you give them?
I would say just don't give up and make sure you utilize your support systems. If you have a diagnosis, seek out others who have that diagnosis. And if you don't have a diagnosis, um, seek counseling or other professional help. There's lots of organizations out there. And, with the World Wide Web and the way social media works now, there's tons of various support groups for all kinds of diagnoses. You just have to get a little bit creative in how you search for them and reach out to people and see the avenues that they took and where they went for second opinions, and just don't stop. You have to speak up, you have to advocate for yourself. I also strongly recommend keeping a journal or starting a blog and keeping track of everything that you went through, not only medically, but also emotionally and physically.
Wow, that's powerful. I'm going to ask everyone in the audience, if you have a question for any of the panelists, please type it in. I want to make sure that the audience questions have a chance to get in. And Abby, as people are typing in questions, can you share an example, or now that you've made this change, how does hearing these stories help you do the work that you're so passionate about doing?
Absolutely. So, Dave, one of the things that was not uncommon to see when I was working in clinical trials was this reality that a lot of times we would get protocol amendments and protocol revisions by the pharmaceutical company, which then would go to our ethics committee and our institutional review board. And unfortunately, there would be a lot of issues with getting everyone who was trained to be on the study or delegated to be on the study to truly be aware of communicating those changes to our patients. And so one example I can think of that definitely helped inform some of my interest in pharmacovigilance today is I remember we had a study where it was a combination therapy of chemotherapy as standard of care, but also it included an oral regimen. And at that time, the pharmaceutical company actually made the decision to include a pill diary as a part of the revised protocol amendment. So I remember we got the amendment approved through our IRB relatively quickly, and our CRO, which is similar to Covance, we had another CRO company called Quintiles, and they were very instrumental in making sure that we had all of the training documentation to ensure that all of our different nurses, physician assistants, and also the various clinical trial coordinators were informed about the change. But unfortunately, we had some situations where there were some staffing issues at our specific clinical site, and we had an IRB violation in the sense that there were people who were responsible for communicating those findings to the patient, specifically related to the new pill diary. And those specific people had never received formal training on this new IRB approved protocol. So what that essentially meant was that we had, of our 10 or 12 patients who were on the study, there were about 3 of them who had their study visits within that 2-week period when our main physician investigator was not on duty. He had been put on inpatient service. So we had another couple of physicians who ended up going onto the study, and they weren't trained, they weren't necessarily IRB approved, and they definitely weren't on the delegation of authority log. So what that meant was that this new pill diary, which in theory was actually a great tool to help the patients be able to document their adherence to the oral regimen, which was taking it twice a day and ensuring that you take it with milk and not water. We had a slew of patients, at least 5 or 6, that unfortunately weren't informed of that change. So that was just an example that I remember from those days of working in the regulatory side, is that, sometimes the pharmaceutical companies and the CRO companies do a great job of making sure that sites have what they need to ensure that patients have informative materials to help them understand these different drug regimens in lay terms and also in clearly communicated terms. But you can sometimes have a lapse in terms of the actual adherence and compliance to that. And what I would just say is that that definitely informed my interest in learning more about how we can prevent adverse drug reactions through something as simple as written communications and written documents that can actually help a patient to actually physically tally up how he or she is adhering or informed about that medicine. And so when we realized that this was an issue, we had to report it to our IRB as a deviation, because this was something that could have been avoided if the actual physician investigator in charge had made sure that the people who were in his place had actually had a chance to truly educate the patients that they saw in those 2 weeks about this new pill diary. So it's interesting, in theory, you'll have something innovative like a pill diary, but it may not necessarily reach the people. And that's why I think that as patients and as caregivers, we have to be so vigilant about making sure that we communicate with our doctors about if there's any type of health related research you're involved with, whether it's a clinical trial, whether it's a database study. Make sure that you keep that communication about, well, has the protocol changed? Have there been any significant safety violations or significant changes to the drug therapy that I should be aware of? Are you, as my doctor or nurse, are you someone who's actually IRB approved for this research? Have you been trained in it? These are questions that people who are patients aren't necessarily geared to ask, but you absolutely always have the right to understand, and you as a patient have the right to be informed. So it's definitely not something that would be too forward to ask if the person who's seeing you or communicating with you about any type of health related research, are you trained? Do you have the most current version of the protocol? Have there been any changes since my last study visit? These are things that I think are absolutely important to ask, and also to make sure that your family members and your caregivers aren't hesitant to ask either.
Oh, I love it. It's so much at the heart of advocating for ourselves. And I love that you said not being afraid to ask and even push. Jacqueline, I have a question for you, and then for KT after. Liz, you said something that really, really impacted me. When I was going through my second diagnosis, I was referred to an endocrinologist for my hormone therapy because my body no longer produced hormones. And his patients were all much, much older prostate cancer survivors. And he treated me just like every other patient that was in that waiting room. And to him, he was giving all of his patients the same level of care. They were all getting treated the same. It's just that I was in my late 20s. And I didn't feel like I was ever heard that the hormone levels of a 70-year-old man were something that would fit the kind of life that I wanted to in my late 20s. And I had to get to a point where I got so angry that I just fired him and found a new doctor. But Jacqueline, my question for you and all the work you do in advocacy is, we don't have to wait till we get to those points, right? We don't have to just get angry and then make a change at that point. How do you and the advocacy work you do help patients around the world sort of see that our voice matters and, you know, how we're a part of this process as partners?
Well, we're all doing it. It's platforms like this. It's actually sharing what we know. Any knowledge we have is completely useless until we share it. And that's when knowledge becomes really, really powerful. So if I know something works, then let it be on our Facebook page, on our website, whatever it is. I need to share that. And that's what everybody here is doing. So that's what makes something like this so powerful. And the more we all work together, the world isn't such a big place. Look at who thought the whole country, the whole world was going to be closed down. I think there's been more work done since last March for advocacy than there probably has been in years. And each one of you, take a bow. It's this kind of platform that works. So thank you.
I love that. And Jacqueline, as you were talking, I've been watching in the chat, Lauren and Danette sharing resources about a session tomorrow and different places to look. Really just asking for help is the start of all things possible. Brad, if you're watching again, I'll mention something Brad always says. It's a cartoon he has on the front of his screen, and it's a Winnie the Pooh caricature. And it says, what is the bravest thing you ever did? And the answer is, I asked for help. And that's what starts everything.
It's the whole thing. Use your voice and be heard.
Yeah, yeah. KT, you've been humble about how many roadblocks you had to overcome. What was it like for you to keep using your voice so many times with seemingly just more and more obstacles than should be there?
For me, it was really difficult because I was a very introverted, shy kid. I went pretty much silent throughout most of my school. I had responses that I was doing that was either, if you asked me a question, I had a way of answering it by either shaking my head yes or no. If it required more of an answer, I would just shrug my shoulders like I didn't know. Most of the times I did know the answer, but I just really didn't want to use my voice. The idea that I ended up losing people who were very significant to me and then finding out that I was fighting for my life was a big step on the foot that made me finally holler and use my voice. Once I had that survivorship, I also had survivor remorse too, or survivor guilt, where I felt as though I had an argument. I'm not a very religious person, but I am very spiritual. And I said to whoever the creator was, well, why didn't you take my grandmother, take my mother or my brother, but leave me here? They were a much better person than me. I'm nothing but this quiet guy. But then I thought about that. I was no longer quiet at that point. I had to use my voice, and because I was using it, I had people from all sorts of life reaching out to me for advice, and I was using research to help folks find solutions where they didn't have them before.
Do you feel stronger, KT, now being able to do that after all the steps you've overcome, or how do you feel now using your voice?
Stronger than ever now. The portions of the story that I've given you so far is not even a cliffhanger. There's a whole lot more to my story than just that trip to Houston, Texas. I would like to be able to give you a little bit more of it, but I don't want to take up everyone else's time. When we get back to it, I'll give you some cliff notes on it.
Oh, that's a cliffhanger. Is there a shorter version you can just start it with us?
Okay, well, the trials, like, give me just a second. I have to sign a paper here. I have people here delivering stuff. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right. Anyway, as I was mentioning, the trials in Texas worked for a while. The cancer kept growing. I ended up the doctor that I had in Texas had a colleague who was at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York and asked me if it would be easier for me to get the Memorial Sloan Kettering. And I was like, hell, why didn't you mention that before? I could have taken a train ride, been there and been back in the same day. And now I got construction going on back here. Anyway, I went to Sloan Kettering for a while, met a whole bunch of researchers there. They tried some more clinical trials that worked for a while. The cancer kept growing. I had every facility give up on me. They were basically writing me off. I went home. I got in front of a computer again. I turned my music up to keep my wife from hearing me crying. Because like Dave, I'm a crier too. I'm just a bigger crier. But I turned the TV up, and there was a crazy episode of Star Trek playing in the background, and I'm looking up all these different researches, and I realized that they were testing something on leukemia that looked like it was matching a protein in the lymphoma that I had, and I didn't understand it. To me, it was a whole bunch of garble, but the Star Trek episode in the background had something that was going on that was very similar. They were trying to destroy this Klingon ship that was hidden behind this cloaking device. And they were like, well, if we can get this thing to uncloak, we can hit it. Well, if you can get my cancer to uncloak, my immune system would be able to identify it and hit it. So I put two and two together, realized that I had that same protein. That protein, in my eyes, was acting like a cloaking device. And once you got rid of that protein, it would work. And just because my mother told me in my darkest hour, if I close my mouth and open my ears, the answer would come to me. To me, that was the solid answer. I went to the researchers with that information. They thought I was crazy, but it was plausible. Tried it on me, scanned me. A week later, my cancer was down 65% after one dose. That's the fastest I've ever told that story.
So powerful, KT. What stands out to me so much in how you share your story is how human you are. You know, this is your real life and everything you're facing. Melissa, can I ask you, it's almost like two different languages, right? Like if we're in medicine or in industry, things have to be regulatory and compliant. And when we're patients, we experience things in very human ways that don't fit into boxes. What is it like to live in that middle?
Yeah, it's like a translation job a lot of the time. And I am a massive advocate for health literacy. I think that everybody deserves the right to make a medical decision based on the information that's in front of them. So very short anecdote, I went through with a friend, I buddied 4 ovarian cancer studies with a friend of mine, and she was diagnosed at stage 4. And when she came out of when she first saw her doctor, she did say in retrospect, she had a wonderful sense of humor, but she did say to me, when your doctor calls you darling, you know you're screwed. But she came out and said to me, did he just say I had cancer? Because he'd used the word tumor all the way through. He talked to her about eligibility of clinical trials and all of these words, and she just came out and just said, what the hell just happened? So me being me goes steaming back in and said, can you try and explain that in a way that this lady can understand? She doesn't even know whether you said she had cancer. And he said, of course she did. I told her. I said, no, you said she had a tumor. So from that day onwards, that was 2007. From that day onwards, I said, right, that's it. If it doesn't get past my patient advisory board, it doesn't go in the materials that we produce. It doesn't go in the videos, the brochures. Hopefully, it doesn't even go in the ICFs, and informed consent forms are completely different. We could speak for hours about those, but I won't. So I spend my life kind of looking at it from an adult perspective, asking the patients in my advocacy groups, asking children, my own child, does that make sense to you? If you were being asked to read this and take action on it, I've got 3 girls from 20 down to 13. Can you understand this? And can you understand it when you're scared and stressed and upset? And I think that's the pressure test. And if you can't understand it when you're scared and upset and stressed, then don't put it down in writing. So yeah, I do spend a lot of my time looking at things. We did some great work. We pulled people off the streets once and just said, do you know what this word means? You know, randomization, eligibility, just lots of different things. And I learn every day. And really importantly, earlier, I wanted to jump in, but when you said about ask for help, I ask for help every single day from the patient groups that I speak to, because I don't know, I am not going to get it right all the time. I'm one person. But if I can ask for help, we can make it better together. And I think that's where the secret lies.
Yeah, and you just hit on something incredibly important too with patient advisory boards or getting patient input. That's something we're going to talk about here coming up this afternoon. What can you share what that's like, just to kind of set the stage for that? What is it like to use that as part of the process?
An advocacy board. So fantastic. So what we like to do is to go out and not only talk to patients, but also have caregivers as part of that, nurses, clinicians, patient advocacy groups, a real wide mix, because we want to make sure we get a 360 view of things. So if it's a family, we'd have the voice of the family, we'd have parents, maybe caregivers to the child. And then we can be doing, you can do surveys straight away. We can do qualitative interviews. We can get around a table, please, if COVID eventually goes, we can get back around our tables and really bash out important documents like how an ICF is written. And I was lucky enough to do a great deal of work with the children's group in London out of Great Ormond Street Hospital. And we had 30 children in a room with 30 doctors. And I tell you what, it was the doctors that looked terrified, not the children. And they were the most wonderful advocates. And they told the doctors how it was. Don't tell me you're not that a blood draw is a scratch. Actually, they hurt, but just tell me you try your best not to hurt me. Don't lie, be honest. So that's the way we do them. We do them, however, we could do them on a panel like this. We could do them face to face. Again, I've done them in hospital settings as well. Whatever works for what you're trying to achieve. And I think if you can work out what you're trying to achieve and then work backwards, usually that is the best way of doing it. But I say all comers. I mean, I would just love every single person listening today to be able to sign up and say, right, I want to get my voice heard, and I'm going to do that in whichever way is comfortable to them. They might be responding to a survey. If they don't want to speak out loud, it might be coming and having a face-to-face video conversation like this. So it's got to work for the person that you're talking to.
Yeah, I love that. For GRIT, we have what we call the GRIT Project, which is a chance for people to learn about different ways to share their voice. Liz, that's what you were a part of. And so if anybody wants to visit the GRIT Project booth, they can learn more. And then all of our exhibitors and all of the sessions and things here, ask questions and find, Melissa, you said whatever's the right fit for you, find whatever is the right thing for each individual. So with just over 10 minutes left, I want to switch to a little bit of a rapid fire kind of finish. There's so much expertise and experience in this group. Can we just go right around? And Liz, I'll start with you, Jacqueline, Abby, and KT. If you could share a tip, and Melissa said, just ask for help, always ask for help. Liz, if you had a tip or something you would share with someone else, what might that be? And I realize I'm putting you on the spot first. So
one tip, probably to not be afraid to fight from the beginning. No one knows your body like you do. And if they're not finding results for something, and you feel like there really is something wrong, either push them to do more testing or go somewhere else where somebody will help you.
Is the takeaway, Liz, I feel, is trust yourself. If you know something's wrong, trust yourself. That's a great point. I want to mention we're doing a special session tomorrow morning too, at 9 a.m. Eastern. And the session is called, Did Cancer Get Lost in COVID? And it is all about appointments that have been missed and screenings that have been put off. And I would invite everybody to join us for that session tomorrow morning, because Liz, it is exactly what you're saying. It's not being afraid to ask and reschedule, and so important to our health.
Yeah, I would have probably been diagnosed at least 2 years earlier had I pushed a little bit more and had a little bit more confidence in what I was experiencing.
Mm. I have a huge hug for you and respect that advice tremendously. Thank you. Jacqueline, what are your tips or what would you share?
Okay, well, I would say don't let anybody take your light. We all have a light inside us, and nobody has the right to take that from us. I think quite often patients are afraid to ask for a second opinion. They don't want to upset their doctor. Not your doctor's life, it's yours. Always look for a second opinion. If your gut tells you something is wrong, like Liz has said, there's something wrong, and you know your body. So don't be put off, and go and get a second opinion.
We talked about finding your light, Jacqueline, in our prep session. Can you share what that means to you for everyone?
Like I said, we all have a light inside us. Every one of us is a light. And if we allow people to ignore what we're saying, put us down, write us off, ignore the fact that, yes, I may be suffering from depression, but you know what? I have been sick for months and months and nobody is hearing me. Don't allow anybody to do that. Nobody has the right to take another person's light. They just don't. We all have to treat each other with respect. And even with the work that Melissa's doing, I mean, that's just so empowering. That's actually giving people their life back. That's so important.
We titled this discussion, The Power of Your Voice, the Importance of Your Voice. And we should never doubt our ability, right? Just whatever it is, let it out. Doesn't matter if it's formed or perfectly said, just let it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Abby, what is your advice or what tips do you have?
Absolutely. I think one thing that I just try to keep in mind, not only as a patient, but also as someone who's a family member of a patient, is just thinking about how we have to remember that all over the world, healthcare is very contractual. And I think it's just so important for people to just keep in mind that whether it's the patient bill of rights that's posted on your hospital or clinical facility's website, or if it's a clinical trial ICF informed consent document that you've signed, or if it's something related to HIPAA or some type of patient privacy clinical trial agreement that you may have signed, it's really important to make sure you keep abreast of what the language is in those documents. You know, a lot of times when we're in an intake situation or we're sort of signed up for a trial or even just for standard of care, we will sign a lot of papers at the intake and with the medical secretary, but it's also one of those things where you may be able to get a copy. So I would definitely encourage everyone to keep a copy of that. Check the language regularly. If you have any questions about it, make sure that your physicians, nurses, and medical administrative teams are aware of any types of uncertainties or any type of verbiage that's uncertain to you, because you have that right as a patient. And just remember that these are contracts, not only things that you've signed, but even things that the actual facility may hold as something that's part of their own accreditation. So you have that right as the patient or the family member to question things. And a lot of times this gets into the regulatory and legal sides of language. So just make sure that you're aware of those things and that you don't feel hesitant or afraid to ask the big questions about, well, what does this clause mean? Has there been a change to the clinical trial or to the patient bill of rights since the time that I've been a patient? These are things that you have a right to know about, and just don't be afraid of any type of written paperwork or questioning what those things mean.
That's amazing. It sounds to me, Abby, like if somebody asked you those questions as a professional, would you say thank you or appreciate their perspective, right?
You definitely would want to appreciate the perspective. I mean, that's part of what you would think the Hippocratic Oath and a lot of the different oaths in public health. And you're thinking about, sort of, you're not just studying a person or trying to help a person in terms of something that's more like sort of a transactional thing. Healthcare really should be something that's empathetic and also something that has a really deep meaning. And part of that means not being afraid to listen to your patients. So yeah, absolutely, you're right. I definitely would appreciate any questions, even if the person thought it was a small question. They have the right to ask it.
I love it. Thank you so much. And KT, what are your tips or what advice would you share?
For me, you haven't tried everything. There's always something else to try. I'm one of those folks, you just couldn't pin me and put me into a box because I'm going to exhaust myself trying to find a way out of it. If it wasn't Google, which Google told me a million ways that I was going to die. Then I tried other search avenues. Who the heck puts their diagnosis in YouTube and finds an answer? Somebody crazy like me. But it's only crazy until it actually works. Then they say it's genius. So I don't mind opening my mouth anymore. I don't mind sounding crazy, because so far my crazy has saved my life and has kept me going, and has kept a whole lot of other people going in that wake.
That is amazing, KT. Thank you. As we slide into our last 5 minutes, and I'm so sad this discussion is drawing to a close. We could do this for another hour without missing a beat. I do want to let everyone know that starting at 1 o'clock, we're going into 2 separate sessions. So if you want to continue this, the title of our next session at 1 is How the Patient Voice Improves Trial Design. And I saw Jim Howley making some comments. Jim will be in that session. So if you want to continue in this dialogue and see how the patient voice is actually changing clinical trial design to make it less burdensome and make it reflect our experience as individuals, that will be a powerful session with some individuals doing some incredible work. And then there is also in the other track, emotional well-being and resilience in the face of cancer. And David Victorson is someone who's been a huge part of my journey and champion and human I respect incredibly. So depending on whichever session you want to be a part of, you can go into either, and they'll both be recorded. So if you miss one, you can come back to it at any other time. Lauren on our team just wanted me to remind you that when this session closes, just go right in that the auditorium icon and hit play, and it'll take you into whichever session you want to go into. And then, so I mentioned the special session tomorrow at 9 a.m. I also want to mention in early January, we're going to do a session which actually showcases how some of the research we've done is being used and presented at medical conferences and helping to inform patient education materials. So stay tuned, much more for that coming, and just excited to continue that conversation. So we've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to go right around and ask you in 30 seconds or so. It has been such an honor to have each of you sharing your perspectives. What do you want to leave the audience with, or what does this mean to you? And if we could go Melissa, KT, Abby, Jacqueline, and Liz. Melissa, what would you share with our audience?
Never stop using your voice, because there are, you see by where we are today, there are people to listen. And if they're not listening, then tell them to listen, because you deserve treatments of the future that are right for you. So never, ever, ever stop using your voice.
I love it. KT, what's your closing words?
I'm going to piggyback off of the using the voice. I had to really learn how to do that. Also, never give up. There's always a way. If it's not a way, make a way.
Powerful. I love it. Abby, for you?
Just keep in mind that using your voice does not always happen in person. With the rise of various patient portals and also different databases, you now have more control over being able to update your doctors and nurses by computer and also by telephone. So definitely take advantage of some of the patient portal and telehealth options to keep your care team abreast of any changes in real time. We have so many more platforms digitally now that help us do this. So definitely don't feel hesitant to use them to help communicate your concerns.
I love it. Jacqueline, what's yours?
Well, for me, it's pretty much the same as everybody else is saying. Just keep going, one foot in front of the other, one day at a time, and don't let anybody say no to you. Just keep going and be heard.
Thank you so much. Liz, for you?
I would say educate yourself about your diagnosis and share what you learn about that with your care team. Due to the research that I did and the organizations that I found for bladder cancer, I shared those with my oncologist, and he had never heard of those organizations. He didn't know some of those facts, and he's someone who specializes in treating bladder cancer patients. And because of my voice and my persistence, he has not only changed how his organization does trial planning, but he has also learned the value of having an advocate at the table for those planning sessions.
Changing the world, Liz, for yourself and for others. That's so amazing. I want to give my heartfelt thank you and gratitude to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for everybody for being with us. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. Stay close, and we hope you enjoy the next sessions. Cheers, everyone.